He found himself at the arid banks of the Tagazi River once more. This time the stranger was already there, sitting cross-legged in what would have been a fertile field a long time ago. Seemingly, the man had been waiting for Ermias as he rose to his feet in a swift and fluid motion to dust off his black suit and greet him. "Tina Stellan," Ermias said with a polite nod of his head. The hint of a smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. Any day meeting the stranger had been a good one, or a better one at least. "Congratulations!" the man exclaimed in return, much to the younger man's confusion. Ermias eyed the man expectantly for an explanation of that odd exchange. When no clarification was offered, Ermias mumbled a puzzled, "Thank you." In his initial excitement and confusion, he had all but forgotten the aching ball of grief festering in his chest. Then it all came back to him, and he felt himself stagger. The stranger's expression changed almost instantly. "She died," he stated. He knew, of course he knew. Ermias could barely bring himself to nod, repressing the wave of regret and pain and grief and rage and loss. He felt sick. He allowed his body to fall onto the sand beneath his feet. They talked and wept until the sun had set, and beneath the devastating depth and beauty of the night sky illuminated by a billion stars, it felt almost ridiculous to be so filled with agony. "You know," the stranger began, "you are part of the last generation to ever have felt the joy of misery." Ermias stayed silent, wiping the sand sticking to his dried tears from his face. He waited for this odd, wise man to turn pain into beauty, as he had done the times they'd met before. "When you were born, the human race had only just learned the genetic alphabet. Over the following decades, we have learned to read genetics, and now we can write in genetics. As we speak, our genome is being altered by scientists at universities around the world, and many years from now, these newly created beings will look back on us with pity and a sense of homesickness, because we knew more about the atom than about the human mind. They will live a life free of pain, free of sickness, free of suffering, free of misery, if they choose to pay the price." Ermias listened intently, his mind conjuring up images of an impossible paradise, free of pain, free of the symptoms of living in a world on fire. "Do you know what price that is, Wetet?" the man asked, watching him, reading him. The younger man nodded mutely. "Good," said the man. "Remember that." The stranger left before Ermias. He sat in silence and listened to the night speaking to him in the voices of locusts and cicadas. He thought about the stranger's words. He thought about generations of man being genetically optimized to the point where they were no longer part of the same species. He thought about the mistakes a scientist could make that would only come to light generations after having been composed into a genetic epic. Human beings tampering with the very fabric of what made them such. Humanity graduating into godhood. Perhaps, he thought, it wasn't the pain that made him human, but rather the capacity to feel it. The ability to care unlike a god who had no such obligation. A beautifully painful gift to possess. What a tragic fate it would be to inhabit a dying world without being able to mourn its loss. By the time Ermias reached his house, the sun was starting to rise again, and he walked briskly to avoid seeing the faces of the ones who had not survived the night. He had seen enough for several lifetimes, he thought. The house felt too big now without his mother. It felt empty and unfamiliar. He imagined he would grow used to being alone eventually. It was both too early and too late to go to sleep, so he instead decided to sit at his desk and finalize his latest poem. The words of the stranger were still loud and clear in his mind, and he felt as though his pen was alive and guiding his hand across the page. Once finished, he presented his work to an invisible audience of excited onlookers. He read, "We are what remains of the age of gods and monsters. We are what remains of bygone days of wonders. We are what remains of marbled halls of old. We are what remains of stained glass and plated gold. We are what remains of monuments of stone. We are what remains of sword and crown and throne. We are what remains of ages long since past. We are what remains, but what remains of us."